start yours. So,
Okay.
yeah. So, welcome to this VanTUG event. We are an IT pro community based in Vancouver. We've been around for almost 3 decades, starting with the as an NT user group and evolving over the years to a more broader audience. And we're happy to have Kevin with us today. Kevin Kaminski, a Microsoft MVP. I say quite fortunate to not only have a friendship with him, but also have some working engagements together, and so get to experience all his expertise in endpoint management and related areas. So with all, I think, Evan, if you can introduce yourself and start, then I think you can do a better job than I can.
Sure. Yeah. I'm Kevin Kaminski. I've had lengthy tenure with end user computing and device management at scale. I've seen a lot of different things from uh, application packaging, deployment, system imaging, patching, you know, virtual desktops. It's gone around a whole lot in terms of how things are done. I've seen everything move from being focused on prem in the data center to more of a cloud-based reality. So what we're going to do is talk about Windows Autopatch today. And Windows Autopatch is the latest approach to patching that Microsoft offers for devices using Intune. So I'll get more into the details, but before we do that, I'll just dip into some of the background with patching. So let's start. There we go. So before we really go too much into Windows 10 patching,
You need to share your screen. I'm still sharing, I believe.
Oh, sorry. Okay, let
Yeah,
me
no
share
problem.
my screen. Okay, good thing we catch this early. So what we're trying to do with servicing is make it more simple. And when we shifted to Windows 10, there was a focus in terms of taking away a lot of choice when it came to how you patched your devices. So the primary driver behind that was really the fact that uh, customers, if you gave them the choice, they were very selective with certain patches they applied. And this was very evident with customers that use Windows Server update services or systems management configuration, a systems management server, sorry, and blurring that with configuration manager, which is the same product. But the idea was with those update catalogs, you could be very specific as to what updates went where, and that could be very specific in terms of hot fixes. And that led to the fragmentation you see over here on the left, where, it became very hard to determine what the average Windows 7 machine looked like when it came to patch testing. Because the reality is when Microsoft's testing patches, they're testing against a machine that has all the applicable patches applied, and that's a much more predictable code base than having one that has a selective application of patches applied. So Windows as a service started it out with some concepts that changed. In the early testing, there was the Windows Insider branch that allowed us to test basically beta code and validate it before looking at any sort of wider release. Um, when Microsoft got confidence with that, they would then take it to the current branch, and that would be deployed to early adopters inside your organization. But it was essentially considered consumer ready Windows code. Then we had current branch for business, which was just a bunch of people that lagged behind the current branch to make sure that the code was stable before taking on the updates. And then finally, it's not really, well, I guess it is a servicing branch, but generally, this was intended for machines that don't really use Windows Update for Business or the very specialized machines that are um, generally restricted in the amount of change they're allowed to undergo because it might break business critical software or in a lot of cases hardware that's attached to the machine that can't easily be replaced. So what ended up happening is Microsoft decided a current branch for business was kind of didn't make a lot of sense and was a little bit too cautious. And then branch didn't sound good, so we started flipping everything to say channel. And what it really did is it simplified things enough to be that what you're looking at is the far left, which is you're potentially testing preview builds. Now, I'll be frank. Almost no customers I work with uh, test preview builds. They just don't have the time of day to do it. And if they do happen to do it, it might be for a very specific feature they want to onboard. But unfortunately, um, even though I recommend people run a handful of machines or virtual machines with the insider preview, usually the bandwidth isn't given to do those sorts of activities. So really, when you're managing the release of Windows inside your environment or the updates, the feature updates, uh, it's more of a focus on adopting the current channel and getting it rolled out to your fleet, where you may have some exceptions that are stuck using long-term servicing channel builds. So with reducing the patch complexity, that left you with the feature updates that would come out twice a year with new capabilities, and they had rollback capabilities, as well as they weren't usually big application compatibility hurdles. So for that, that became a bit easier to digest. And then what we have is quality updates, and rather than giving customers numerous fixes to look at, they would be rolled up into quality updates as much as possible to simplify your patching. So there's less patch deployments you actually have to keep track of because you're rolling up your changes into less releases. But I think where this fell down is this diagram, even though it beautifully explains what Microsoft was initially doing with Windows servicing, it also created too much complexity because, as a customer, you don't really care about the engineering builds and the internal Microsoft builds because you just don't see them. They're for internal consumption, and that's the reality of that. Like, if you want, there's insider preview builds that nobody seems to run for testing, but they're available for you to use. What it really what really fell apart here with the deployment of Windows updates in Windows 10 is Microsoft tried to take a really cautious approach with Windows servicing. So initially, they imagined that you would slowly release to rings over time. And as you release to these rings, you would almost double or triple the number of machines in each ring until you deploy the whole company. Now, that was generally not a bad idea. The problem where this became an issue is companies don't really have the bandwidth to monitor the deployment of a feature update to their organization over the period of 12, 16 months. Like, that's just too long of a process, even though it doesn't have to be terribly hands-on. And also, the other thing is it gave you a sense of security, but the reality is that uh, the, the rate in which applications would break is extremely low with feature updates compared to going from like XP to Windows 7, doing those earlier operating system jumps. These uh, the update platform and how Microsoft manages the API interfaces on Windows is a lot more oriented towards compatibility. And if you're an enterprise customer, you can even come to them with applications that are broken because you don't have source code to fix it, the vendor doesn't exist, a number of reasons. As long as they're legitimate reasons. If you don't want to pay for the application upgrade, that's your problem. But if you're stuck in a really difficult situation, App Assure can be used to help unblock those applications, as Microsoft may introduce a compatibility fix in the operating system to remediate that sort of issue. So patching is also difficult because you have to look at the data and eventually try to determine compliance. And that isn't all solved by Autopatch. Autopatch tries to help with that, but it does put rules around what it considers valid devices and applications to be patched. So in addition to that, you also have the fact that devices get lost and they might be offline for a while. They might come back, they might not. It's really hard to determine, your real fleet because of these edge cases with devices. It's easy to see that 90% compliance, but getting to 95 or 98% can involve a lot of effort because you have to account for devices that may have disappeared or are stuck in someone's desk for 6 months while they're on a sabbatical. Like, there's all sorts of reason hardware disappears and reappears, and that can affect your numbers. So, in addition to that, you also have to look at making sure you're managing the user experience, and that partially is where the users sit in terms of the patching process. You know, if they're an IT user, you generally would like to see them further ahead in the patching process to potentially find and resolve issues. But as the patches go out to other devices in your fleet, um, but how do you really determine who's a good candidate for going first versus a good candidate for going last? And Autopatch tries to help do that with telemetry to find out where people should be scheduled in their deployments, in their patching deployments. And, you know, finally, getting visibility into patching issues has been historically difficult with Intune. So we'll also have a look at how that can be resolved. So with Autopatch, the idea is to introduce better patch compliance. Uh, by giving your users the latest productivity enhancements sooner, by getting those patches out the door faster. And so the idea with this is that uh, you basically onboard devices in to Autopatch, and Autopatch does a lot of the behind the scenes scheduling of updates with the devices, and then the user relies on the update mechanisms that are built into Windows or Office or Edge or Teams to manage the updates that are being done with Autopatch. So you'd heard me say a few other products besides Windows, and that's really the advantage of this is you're being able to uh, basically provide Windows patching in a very automated fashion, but also support Office, Teams, and Edge. And the idea is to bring up your compliance as fast as possible. So by understanding what you're running in your environment with telemetry, Microsoft's able to more quickly deploy patches to your devices with more confidence. And with Autopilot, this also now includes drivers and firmware, which I think is very important. You know, the drivers and firmware they include are not all drivers and firmware. It would be nice if it was, but usually every major hardware manufacturer is supplying the core drivers that go with their models to Windows updates so they can be delivered via Windows Update for Business to devices. Um, the exclusion is coming in with some like Bluetooth devices don't always have their drivers up there. But the idea is firmware based attacks are becoming more common, and it's more important now than ever, not just even from a security standpoint, but I even noticed with Windows 10 where weird issues would creep up if Windows was up to date and the drivers and firmware weren't on a device. So it's really important to keep this stuff up to date. And this is where Autopatch provides you an easy way to make sure that stuff stays up to date. So for requirements, it's pretty straightforward. You need Entra ID at a very minimum, or Azure, otherwise known as Azure AD. The device has to be joined to it. It also has to be enrolled in Intune, and It can be Windows 10, Enterprise, or Professional, but the academic licenses are excluded for some bizarre reason. I really hate that. As well as Frontline, which I don't understand because Frontline machines, I think, would really benefit from Autopatch. So the devices also have to be company owned. So BYOD devices cannot be managed with this method. And you'll see some more requirements, but it's important that these devices stay in contact with Intune within every 28 days. It's basically to show up on the reporting data. The devices also need a serial number, model, and manufacturer defined in the BIOS, which I found very interesting because there is some hardware. You might wonder, well, what hardware comes like that? Like the Intel NUCs, if you bought one of those, they wouldn't fully tattoo the BIOS with information. You would have to do that with a special tool. But yeah, so some like OEM gear might not meet this manufacturer specification with the BIOS. So just make sure that you're taking care of that if you have some hardware that is uh, I guess. Oh, yeah.
So Kevin,
Yeah.
so based on the comment, the typical vendors, right? HP, Dell, Lenovo, they would all comply with that by default, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. The Intel NUC was the one I ran into as an issue because I'm sure if you Google for it, there's a article by oh ex Microsoft Michael Niehaus, and
Yeah, anyhow, yeah.
he had an issue with uh, Intel NUCs working with Autopilot, and it's because they don't populate their BIOS on them.
Yeah, sorry to extend on this thing. Yeah, well, we'll find out where Mike Niehaus will land, right? He just left
Yeah,
Titanium. So
yeah,
hopefully back to Microsoft. But so will virtual machines work with that? So if you have don't
yeah.
know, a VDI environment or something like that, I guess this will be compliant, right?
Yeah, I actually recommend this with Windows 365 because it can go in there and just manage the patching for you, and you don't really have to think about it. I know with AVD there's a lot more considerations, but with Windows 365, I see this as a nice fit for those devices. If it's a standard knowledge worker device, I really see this as being the patching solution for those people. I know everybody's like, well, these guys are special in this line of business application, but uh, I don't know. I really see a lot of people falling into the knowledge worker bucket more or less, and then yeah, sure, you have some specialized systems somewhere, but you don't need to patch everything with config man to be safe. I
And that
think
makes
there's
your comment, right, on the F3 license not being covered even more relevant because if there's one set of users that you want, automation and light management is exactly the F3 licensed
yeah,
users.
exactly. These users you don't want to babysit. You just want to patch their machines and get it done. So yeah, I don't get why they licensed it the way they did. So co-management, really, you just need to make sure you have a supported version of config and it must be cloud attached. And you have to make sure the following workloads are switched over to Intune, which would be Windows Update, the device configuration, and the click to run applications. But more importantly is making sure Intune is managing the device. I learned the the hard way that no matter what you do with Intune, if there's something else playing with the configuration of Windows Update, Intune will always lose, which I think is stupid, but that's how it works. Even if you tell Intune to override, like if you tell MDM to override group policy, still won't work. So basically, if you're going to manage devices with Windows Update for Business and or Autopatch, you have to make sure there's no local group policies. You have to make sure there's no domain group policies that are managing it. Local registry manipulation is also an issue. And what really messed up my day was I spent a few weeks looking at the issue, and then I eventually found out there was a third-party patching product that was messing with the Windows Update Agent configuration as well. So, yeah, if you have something like N Central in your environment and it's doing the patching instead of everything else, then yeah, that's going to break it as well. So you really need to make sure that there is nothing playing around in the local machine. So just to get into what that actually looks like, there. But I would go into some examples. So yeah, when you're in group policy, you know, you're under computer configuration and oops, sorry, I'm awful at that. Computer configuration, administrative templates, and then you got to go to Windows components and then basically go down, 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 way down to where Windows Update lives down here. But once you get down to Windows Update, these policies should really all be unconfigured if you're going to do update for business with Intune. Well, or Autopatch, I should say. Like this all needs to be empty. So if you go in here and, you know, here's one, this one alone will just disable automatic patching. Another favorite is, you know, specifying a WSUS server. That always is bad news. You know, so there's ways to get in the way. And then if you go into, you know, if we go look at the registry under HKey local machine software policies, Microsoft Windows, Windows Update. You know, anything under here can be an issue for Windows Update for Business as well. So even if your policies are clear, if there's registry values tattooed here, they are a problem as well. So, yeah, I just cannot stress enough how much you have to make sure all that is nice and clean. Otherwise, yeah, it'll interfere with Autopatch. Luckily, Autopatch will start to report on issues like that because if you're in a zero trust environment where your devices are only joined to Azure AD or Entra ID, that means, you know, even if you're on the same network, you might not be able to get remote access to the machine because it's not trusting the network with any local file shares or anything. And because it's not on a regular domain, then, you know, you don't have domain credentials. And yeah, it's a bit of a mess. So this is where the reporting is definitely necessary and helpful with the client issues, because looking at a client remotely with Intune is still a little bit of a pain in the butt, I guess. It's the best way to put it. So Autopatch has SLAs, and the way they work that in is they target certain levels of compliance. So what they have is with quality updates, it's 95% of eligible devices within 21 days after release. And that is also dependent on the fact that these devices, well, actually, we'll get to that point in a second, but there's even more conditions to that. With feature updates, the idea is to roll out to 99% of eligible devices, but for some reason they don't give a marker in time as to when that should happen. Microsoft 365, it's 90% of eligible devices. And with Edge, there's no SLA, and Teams, there's no SLA. So to try and make sense of what eligibility is for these updates, you have to understand a set of requirements to determine if the device is healthy and active, which determines if it gets considered eligible as for the reporting of the device states. So each area of Autopatch will have its specific requirements. So Windows has the most interesting one. You need 6 hours of device usage with at least 2 hours of continuous usage. And what that basically means, after that amount of usage, Windows will engage with the user and patch the device. So I think that's something that people kind of get shocked when they figure this out. But if I deploy an autopilot device and the user doesn't log into it, it doesn't patch, basically. It needs that user login. So with the Intune sync, the device has to talk to Intune in the last 5 days. You need at least more than 1 gig of free storage on the device. The device needs to be patched. There's a bunch of network connectivity requirements to Windows Update to make sure it'll actually be able to download and work. It also must be properly licensed for Autopatch. The device must not be targeted with any servicing settings in Intune. So I didn't really show it, but the thing is in Intune, you have, I'll just go for, yeah. With Intune, when you're looking at patching, you can go to Windows under here, and there's a bunch of patching settings here. Autopatch puts in some of its own policies. And so if you rebuilt your own patching policies for Windows 10, you're going to have to go and make sure that they don't conflict or are cross-targeted with devices that are part of Autopatch. Also, group policy, already talked about that. The group policy conflict is a big deal as well, because it will prevent it from working. Group policy is probably a bigger issue. Anything locally on the machine is a big no-no. The Office eligibility is pretty simple. You just need connectivity to the Office CDN. You must let Autopatch configure Office update policies. So, unfortunately, there's several ways to configure Office. There's group policy, local group policy, uh, registry edits, Office cloud policies, Intune MDM. Yeah, you gotta you gotta know which method you chose to configure Office and make sure that the update configuration settings aren't set, as they would conflict with Autopatch. Edge is in a similar bucket. There's not a lot to it. It needs its service endpoints available, and you need to make sure that you're not conflicting with other MDM settings, or I guess I should add uh, group policy and local reg settings as well. Just make sure that you're always using uh, the auto patch settings for updates. The user will have to close Edge to patch it and reopen it. Office is the same way as well. Teams is the same way as well. The Teams eligibility is a little bit different. It's standard connectivity requirements, but it does require the user to be logged into Windows, and the user must be logged in and idle for 40 minutes before it tries to update. So just some internal, I guess, mechanics with how it works. But the thing with Autopatch is, even though we're programming Windows Update, and we're doing Office updates, Edge updates, and Teams updates, the reality is all those update engines are separate from each other. And so the only thing that's really common between them is Autopatch managing the releases of patches to these devices, uh, to the OS and these applications. That's probably the best way to word it. So with all this weird stuff going on, and uh, letting Autopatch manage the actual patching, what does that actually produce? Well, the idea is, instead of taking 12 to 16 weeks to roll out a patch or a feature update, you try to get this done in a month. And that is a very, different time scale. And that is to not only provide better protection through being patched, but also just better providing better experiences to your users by delivering the fixes faster. The thing that you really want to realize with this is, there's a perceived value in pulling the trigger with every little patch. And what Microsoft is really saying here is that's not where the value is. The value is getting the patches out quickly to protect your organization, while being able to quickly identify and remediate issues with your patching. So instead of being tied up for hours building lists of users and computers and deploying to groups, you can now, deal with things in a much more automated fashion, where Autopatch is going to do the risk assessment and try to figure out what ring to put people into. If you want to override the assignments, you can do that, uh, but don't micromanage the ring assignments. That's not really what it's meant to do. So let's have another look at the console here. Oh, there we go. Okay, so going into Autopatch, it's off the devices node. I don't know why it's up here in the root because, here's Windows, but anyway, Autopatch is up here in the root of devices. I can click my devices and it's going to show me a number of devices I have enrolled. I think these two are Hyper-V. This one is Windows 365, and that one, oh no, these two are Asus motherboards. Sorry, that's why it says system serial number. And this one's actually a Surface. So but basically it threw everything into ring one for my test environment. And so I wanted one machine to be a test machine, so I manually moved this one over to the new ring. But I could like move it back if I wanted to. I could switch it back to one of my other Autopatch. Sorry, force a habit. Um, one of my other Autopatch rings. Um, so I don't have to go with how the system is assigned it. I currently assigned it into test just so I have something in test. Uh, the onboarding process is pretty simple. Um, you know, it can go and discover devices for you, and then you can add them to Autopatch. So by default, devices are not added to Autopatch, but there is an Azure AD group for Autopatch devices that you can shove machines into as well. So the reality is that we're not gonna like when you turn on Autopatch in a tenant, it's not gonna automatically onboard everything. This not ready area is to help you understand client issues. So maybe there's a configuration issue with Windows Update. This is where that information gets pulled in. It's in a preview state, but it should generally work. Um, no, I should have one unregistered device, but yeah, it's not there. So with it, it's really like there's not a lot to manage. It emails you release announcements as to when it's going to release certain things to your environment. So you're getting that via email. You can go here and double check the releases if you need to make sure there's, you didn't miss anything. Also, the release articles do get updated. So Microsoft has done a better job of communicating what's in the update, known issues, possible remediations. So it's important to always look at these actual release articles that come with the updates if you don't look at them. Also, there is uh, a mailing list. It's was it patchmanagement.org. That one basically, uh, yeah, I think it's patchmanagement.org. Yeah, they have a pretty active mailing list if you do a lot of patching. So if you want to make sure you get the latest chatter on updates, especially bad updates, it's worth checking them out. So with the release schedule, I'll just quickly go over here. There's quality updates. There's the different rings here for them. Um, it just really shows the schedule. And if I want, let's just say I know that something's going horribly wrong with the November release. So I'll just go and say, you know what, we're going to pause this deployment, uh, breaking.net 351, and then, you can pause the deployment for your organization. You could be more specific if you want, but that is essentially what you want to do. Is if there's a bad update, you want to pause it, and then anybody who's been affected by it in a very bad way, you may look into uninstalling the patch for those machines for the time being, and then once you have resolution on the patch, you can go back in and you can resume. So feature updates is pretty much the same. The release settings, some important things here. You may want to enable expedited quality updates, which are just basically security updates that are needed to address an urgent issue for security. Uh, Turning on Microsoft 365 app updates is something you have to do separately, which is just flipping the switch, and Windows driver updates have to be enabled as well. Usually when I enable the driver updates, I'm allowing them to be auto approved. But lots of people are less trusting of that, and you can do something such as uh, approving the driver updates that are allowed in your environment. The Autopatch groups, I'm playing with this a little bit. It helps you put some settings around different groupings of machines. So I have basically my regular auto patch deployment, which you can see how Microsoft does it. They start at 1%, then 9%, and then go to 90%, and then yeah, it goes to everybody. So that's the idea of like how they try to roll it out in a three-ring strategy with my environment. I did make a little test group, nothing terribly exciting. I don't know if it's even worth mentioning, but just put together something to push up updates very quickly. Okay, let's go back here to a slide deck. So the reporting for Autopatch is separate from update compliance in Azure Monitor. You may not be familiar with update compliance, but update compliance is another set of data you can pull in regarding the patch compliance of your machines. And it goes into Azure Monitor as a global data ingestion service, and then has reports you can consume that way. Uh, Outside of that, there's reports on your feature update deployment, your quality update deployment. There's a little bit of fracturing with reports because you can see here you have like two data silos, and I'm still trying to find out exactly where the auto patch data lives, because I know where the stuff in Azure Monitor lives, but the auto patch data I'm still trying to figure out. Update issues are typically handled through what are called safeguard holds. So I mentioned this a bit earlier, and this is an important thing to understand, is safeguard holds is Windows Update for Business's way of saying, I know I'm going to break you, so I'm going to tell you not to install this patch. And so with safeguard holds, that allows you to basically provide a level of safety using the telemetry data. So I am a big fan of telemetry because telemetry allows for systems to be a little bit more intelligent as to what they do. And with patching, this is a big deal because, it is so people generally, when they get a bad patch from Microsoft, they only think about all the death and destruction it caused. But the thing is that, Microsoft's really trying not to blow things up when they shove things out the Windows Update for Business path. And so I don't think there's enough discussion around the back end intelligence to prevent disasters. And so the safeguard holds is, a way of unearthing that intelligence. It requires some additional configuration of telemetry, but uh, once you got telemetry configured and the Intune diagnostics connector connected, you have data as well, data in Intune as well as additional data in Azure Monitor that you can leverage to report on the patch compliance in your data in your environment. Sorry. Um, so let's have a quick look at the reporting side. Oh, whoops. Yeah, so there's a modern workplace devices all. If you want to easily onboard devices, you can just shove them into that group and that will automatically put them into Autopatch. But more importantly, if we go to reports, I want to look at a couple things. So with Autopatch, these reports, I don't know where to get the backend data from, but these reports do have auto patch statistics as to, what rig are the machines in, how many are up to date, not up to date, progress, those sorts of things. If you drill a little bit deeper, it gives you a little bit more information if the updates are paused or what the status of the device is. I've also noticed client state and client substate as new fields, but I don't see it consistently populated. But I I I hope this ends up working better because saying that seeing what the client thinks about the whole situation would be nice in terms of data because I saw it earlier this week, and as it was deploying an update, for one of the machines, it said it was actually installing. So you knew the machine was actually trying to install the patch, which is sometimes nice because when you look at a status of compliant, not compliant, it can be a little frustrating because you want to know the why. So also in there, there's the feature update status. It's pretty simple data as well here. If we go down to here, yeah. So it does give some readiness for the next feature update. So if there's a readiness issue, it will come up. But the thing I didn't quite, well, we'll see. Let's see, maybe it came through now. But Windows updates, this reporting has, these summary reports will come with just Autopatch turned on. However, the more detailed reports, you do need to fully set up your telemetry to get that data as well. So, it's not much different than the other reports in terms of like the summary information. These reports are a little bit more interesting because, where is it? Yeah, like if I got some information for some compatibility issues with safeguard holds, basically it gives you a list of risks. It could be low, medium, high to replace the device. So it gives you an idea of whether or not you want to go with upgrading the device or not based on the issue, because the issue might not be a full-on blocker. It just might be you're going to see degraded performance or maybe degraded stability. So it's going to be up to you to make the final call, but it will give you some feedback around devices that might not be uh, ready in terms of hardware, software perspective. Uh, did I want to touch on? Yeah, they have other specific reports for dealing with drivers, just seeing how well the driver updates are doing aside from the actual Windows patching. Expedited updates are also good to look at if you have a critical security update that needs to go out the door and you want to make sure it's actually doing it. So, even though it's optional, like Microsoft doesn't tell you to turn on all the reporting, um, just take the extra time to turn on the additional Windows Update for Business reporting because, yeah, it just fills out the picture a little bit better for you. Oh, are we at the questions? Oh boy, good. I was worried I was going to run a little too long.
Well,
So,
I didn't know, updates can be that exciting, right? That there's a lot of different things to consider. Um, but it's quite exciting, right? That something like this can be automated and delegated to someone else to do.
well, what I really try to sell people on is you're not going to get value over managing the updates. You're going to get value over finding the issues and fixing the issues. And so, autopilot's really, I mean, autopatch is really about yeah, not worrying. I, I forget who it was, but a product manager yelled out, and he's like, "Let the updates flow." But that's kind of the case. Is you look at how your phone behaves and other devices. Everything needs updates. Even my Linux desktop needs its updates. So this is just a fact of life, and it's a low value task to micromanage it. So we want to make it so that if you have to spend time on patching, you're spending your time working on things that deliver value rather than just chasing your tail in circles.
So we had one question on the QA area, but I think you covered.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
yeah, the question was posted 22 minutes ago. So it's like, how do I sign up for Autopatch, and can I target just a subset of devices?
Yeah, maybe what I could do is, where is that? I think this tenant isn't. So tenant enrollment. Yeah, so when you first go to like tenant administration and then Autopatch down here and then the tenant enrollment, basically it will do some checks to see if you're ready. The one I'm failing on is not a big deal because basically it's the fact that I have an unlicensed administrator in the tenant, so it's one of my break glass accounts. Also, co-management technically doesn't exist in this tenant anymore. So that doesn't really apply. But am I blocked? Okay, run checks. Yeah, yeah. See, I can go and you still review. Oh, I still have to review them. Yes, yes, yes. Advisory co-management. Yes. Okay. Hooray.
And that you must be a global admin, right? Do you have PIM or something like that?
Oh, sorry.
PIM is great, right? But if you forget about it, you can spend a good
I
half an
I've been
hour
revoking
lost in
rights
space.
because
Yeah.
I'm getting some really sketchy phishing emails now. I yeah. So so there we go. I get my credentials. Okay. Should be happy now, right? Oh, there we go. There we go. Yeah. Uh, yeah, and so it's not too difficult. You just have to make oops. English. Oh, oh plus. Why can't they make better input boxes? +1 all by space. Gosh, so picky. Oh, a secondary admin. Oh man. Oh, really? Oh, okay. Just a second. Uh, I think before they only wanted one contact, and now they want two. All right.
Nice.
Awesome.
Yeah. The great gift of demos, right? Live demos.
Yeah,
Okay,
live
but the
demo.
enrollment is relatively simple, right? It's
Yeah,
not
that would be
anything
it.
complex.
That would
Yeah.
get it going, and then like literally, yeah, once you have it up and running, you're basically just adding machines to Autopatch.
Yeah. And then the second part of the question, right? Can I just target a subset of devices? And I guess that's exactly how it works, right? You just need to
Yeah.
attach it to a group.
Yeah, you have to intentionally enroll people into it because yeah, they won't. That's like the big. It's probably my biggest concern when I talk to people is, or their biggest concern is, what happens when I turn it on, and yeah, it basically does nothing until something's onboarded. So yeah, like you, it depends how you want to onboard, but uh yeah, you can go in and discover devices. I don't know. Oh, yeah, it should show them up here and then we can onboard them. But yeah, it's a really simple process. So, um it's designed to be simple because yeah, it's about, other than the reporting, everything is really simple. And I mean, the reporting really isn't that bad. And I should just quickly show for those of you that might not realize it, is just if you're looking at the patches, a lot of them do have the ability to uh, export data. So actually, it's always when you're trying to do things at the last minute, but refresh, refresh. Where did they? Yeah, a lot of these reports have, oh, there it is, export. But they'll export to CSV for you, and you can do that to basically manipulate the data how you want in Excel or Power BI, depending how you like it.
Yeah.
So yeah,
When I work for a bank, my patching part of the work is that patching is not my job. My job is creating the reports to show people that patching is happening, right? So
yeah. Well, and yeah, I won't name names, but I was working with a large MSP and their customer had patching issues, and um what they were telling the customer and what I was finding were two totally different stories. I mean, they had about half their fleet out of support. Their Windows 10 version was something like 1903 or something like that, and yeah, and they had local policy set, they had group policy set, and they had a third party patching product managing the updates, and so no wonder nothing worked. It was a complete mess.
awesome. So we don't seem to have more questions. Anything else to add before we wrap this up? I think from us at VanTUG is just to thank you very much for your time
Yeah.
and putting this together. Um, Me personally, on a selfish way, use the user group to, get in touch with great people like you and learn, right? That's my personal development hobby, right? Running the user group and getting great ideas shared with the community. Thank you very much for your time, Kevin.
Yeah, no problem. It's always fun.
Right. Talk soon.
Okay. Bye.